From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Biden signs executive order on safety and justice for Native Americans. Protesters say Facebook incites violence against Muslims. WHO worries as COVID-19 cases in Europe break records. Islamic Center of San Francisco Mosque vandalized. Qatar to represent U.S. in Afghanistan. And our top story tonight. U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday signed an executive order to improve safety and justice for Native Americans. During the first White House Tribal Leaders Summit, President Biden said federal jurisdiction will expand to include crimes of sex trafficking, sexual assault, and child abuse involving Native Americans. It will also include cases of missing and murdered Native Americans where the federal government has jurisdiction. The administration has pledged to work with tribal nations and tribal partners to build safer communities and to support comprehensive law enforcement prevention, intervention, and support services. Researchers say they have identified more than 100 students who died at a residential school for Native Americans in Genoa, Nebraska. The search for the cemetery where many are believed to be buried continues. The Genoa U.S. Indian School was operated by the federal government between 1884 and 1934. It imposed brutal punishment and hard labor on students, many of whom were removed from their families and homelands against their will. Students were prohibited from speaking tribal languages and forced to convert to Christianity. Steve Bannon accused U.S. President Joe Biden of having ordered the Justice Department to prosecute him. After appearing before a judge to hear the charges, the advisor to former President Donald Trump told reporters outside the federal court in Washington that he was going on the offensive.
Every progressive and every liberal in this country that likes freedom of speech and liberty, okay, should be fighting for this case. That's why I'm here today. For everybody, I'm never going to back down, and they took on the wrong guy this time.
But why do you? It is outrageous that a criminal charge was brought in this case. It is a misdemeanor, but it's being treated as if it were a capital case. Mr. Bannon takes this very seriously. It's outrageous what the government did.
A federal grand jury on Friday indicted Bannon for snubbing a subpoena to testify and supply documents to the House Select Committee. The panel is investigating Trump supporters' January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol when Congress was attempting to certify President Biden's 2020 election victory. Protesters rallied outside the headquarters of Meta, formerly known as Facebook, in Menlo Park, California, accusing the social media platform of inciting violence against Muslims in India. Javed Ali, who's with the American Indian Muslim Council, said Facebook is technically promoting hate. He said some dangerous organizations have used the platform to divide people and pit religions against each other. He added that these groups are openly inciting mobs, telling them to kill Muslims, calling them traitors. Similar protests have been held in major U.S. cities, including LA, Seattle, and Chicago. A recent Associated Press report found Facebook has known about these issues for years and has been selective in removing misinformation and anti-Muslim content. Protesters want the company to remove hateful speech, identify dangerous groups, moderate posts, and invest measures in stopping violence. In October, Facebook told Associated Press that it has invested significantly in technology to find hate speech in various languages, including Hindi and Bengali. Facebook claims that it has reduced the amount of hate speech on the platform by half in 2021. One of the oldest mosques in California was vandalized last week, leaving community members rattled, leaders say. San Francisco police said that the incident happened late Friday night when someone threw a bottle at the Islamic Center of San Francisco. Security video shows the suspect turning the corner, throwing the bottle, and running away. People were inside the mosque when they heard a loud noise and glass breaking. Police are still looking for the suspect. A mosque leader said prayers will continue as normal. The center has been part of the San Francisco community since the 1950s. Americans' views about the threat of global warming over the past few years remain largely unchanged, according to a Washington Post, ABC News poll released on Friday. 67% of Americans acknowledge global warming is a serious problem. But that figure is about the same as it was 7 years ago. The poll also found that the partisan divide over the issue has widened. Democrats who see climate change as an existential threat rose by 11 percentage points to 95% over 7 years. The percentage for Republicans fell by 10 percentage points to 39% over the same period. Tolo News reports that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his Qatari counterpart have signed a deal making Qatar the U.S. protecting power in Afghanistan. Blinken said Qatar will establish a U.S. interest section within its embassy in Afghanistan. It added that it will provide certain consular services and monitor the condition and security of U.S. diplomatic facilities in Afghanistan. Saleh Farouk has an interesting look at the tiny but powerful country of Qatar and its growing relationship with the U.S. and the Taliban.
Qatar is the country of Al Jazeera TV. U.S. President Bush wanted to bomb its headquarters in the region. Tony Blair, then the Prime Minister of the UK, claims that he talked him out of it. Instead of bombing Al Jazeera headquarters in Qatar, the U.S. bombed Al Jazeera offices in Afghanistan in 2001. And then in 2003, it bombed Al Jazeera's Iraq offices, killing a reporter and injuring another. A BBC reporter was recording the bombing from the next building. Raja Omar of the BBC says, "We were watching and filming the bombardment, and it's quite clearly a direct strike on the Al Jazeera office. This was not just a stray around. It just seemed too specific." Al Jazeera said it had provided full coordinates of its offices to the U.S. military. That was 20 years ago. Now, the Gulf Kingdom represents the United States. The U.S. Secretary Antony Blinken signed an agreement on November 12, 2001 that established Qatar as the United States protecting power in Afghanistan. Here is the U.S. Secretary of State, Blinken, addressing Qatar's Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani in Qatar, not very far from Al Jazeera headquarters.
Mohammed, let me again say how grateful we are for your leadership, your support on Afghanistan, but also to note that our partnership is much broader than that.
Qatar is a tiny Muslim country that plays a larger role in the region. Qatar has only 313,000 citizens. But there are 2.3 million foreigners to serve them. Qatar practices Sharia law. So do the Taliban. Qatar hosts the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East. But it also hosts the Taliban. American bombers flew from Qatar to bomb Afghanistan. But it is Qatar where America and the Taliban signed the peace deal. Now Qatar is warning against isolating the Taliban. Despite hosting the U.S. airbase, Qatar still claims independence in its foreign policy. Here is its foreign minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani talking about their Iran policy and in the presence of the U.S. Secretary of State.
Iran is a country that we need to maintain a good neighborhood relationship with them. And this relationship has never been at the account of our alliance with the U.S. or our relation with other countries.
This is Saleh Farouk reporting from Toronto for Muslim News.
Indian rights activists say evictions of Assamese residents has heightened insecurities for the state's Muslim population. The issue gained national attention after 2 people were killed in September during a drive to evict 800 mostly Muslim families from Dalpar in Assam's Darang district. Bharatiya Janata Party spokesman Rupam Goswami told Voice of America that the majority of those evicted are Bengali-speaking Muslims settled on government land. In 2019, Genocide Watch issued 2 genocide alerts for India. One was for the treatment of Muslims in Assam, and the other was for its actions in Indian-administered Kashmir. The World Health Organization is concerned about rising cases of COVID-19 in Europe, which has recorded the highest number of infections in 1 week since the pandemic started. Here is WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus.
Almost 2 million cases of COVID-19 were reported in Europe last week, the most in a single week in that region since the pandemic started. Almost 27,000 deaths were reported from Europe, more than half of all COVID-19 deaths globally last week.
Several European Union countries have renewed COVID-19 restrictions to slow the virus's spread. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte announced Western Europe's first partial lockdown as COVID surged there on Friday. It involved 3 weeks of curbs on restaurants, shops, and sporting events. In Germany, Berliners are prepared for new rules starting Monday that exclude people from some public spaces such as bars, restaurants, and hairdressers. Only the vaccinated, or those who have recovered from COVID-19, will be able to enter these and other public spots. In Austria as well, Chancellor Alexander Schallenberger said that the country will begin a lockdown for unvaccinated people amid a record surge in cases. Britain's largest Muslim umbrella organization praised a Liverpool taxi driver whose swift response to a terror attack Sunday may have prevented a wider atrocity. According to police, David Perry's taxi burnt down outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital after a device brought into the cab by a passenger exploded. Perry reportedly locked the passenger in his vehicle after becoming suspicious of him and before he could get inside the hospital with the explosive device. The passenger died in the incident. Perry was released from the hospital after being treated for injuries. Zahra Mohammed, Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain, said in a statement on Monday, "Nothing justifies this reprehensible act." She added that many Muslims work at the hospital, which was being targeted, and which neighbors one of the city's largest mosques. Mohammed said Liverpool has a special place in the history of the British Muslims, being home to one of the earliest Muslim communities in Victorian England. Afghanistan's economy and social services are collapsing while many Afghans are suffering acute malnutrition, according to Human Rights Watch. The group's Asia Advocacy Director, John Sifton, says humanitarian aid is critical. He urged governments, the UN, and international financial institutions to adjust existing restrictions and sanctions affecting Afghanistan's economy and banking sector. Sifton said world governments, the UN, the World Bank, and the Taliban must agree to allow the Afghan central bank access to the international banking system. The group said that if that is not possible, the international community could negotiate a short-term agreement with the Taliban. It could designate a private bank or another entity to process large-scale humanitarian transactions to be monitored by outside groups. According to the UN, nearly 23 million Afghans will face hunger this winter. Coming up next, after the break, we will dig deep into the Virginia elections with Delegate Sam Rasool. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me, for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. To discuss the Democratic Party's performance in Virginia's election, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid, who is speaking with Virginia delegate Sam Rasool. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. Democrats are wondering what happened to them in Virginia. And Republicans are on the move, not only in Virginia, but many other places. We have a Democratic representative who is a delegate to the state of Virginia, Sam Rasool. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Walaikum assalam. Great to be with you, Imam Mujahid.
Tell us what happened to Democrats in Virginia, how it became a red state suddenly.
Thank you so much for your invitation to be with you and for this question, because it's very important. I believe that many times what is happening is we are losing touch as a party with the people in the grassroots. This is very difficult. When you are in power, sometimes that power comes back to bite you if you're not staying connected. I think clearly in Virginia, we ran a very establishment-heavy, very kind of self-righteous tone. We know what is best for you, instead of thinking deep and really showing people the right intention that we are here to represent them, especially since we had so much power and we had this upset. So it's a stern reminder to make sure that we're always staying close to the people.
How come you were able to survive?
Well, alhamdulillah, the people were so kind to give me another opportunity to be able to serve. And I think with clarity, myself being elected in the western part of Virginia, you can think of me as kind of this country Muslim in Appalachia. There are very few people of my faith or identity here. But what we do have is a relationship where we go door to door, where we talk to people, meet them where they're at. And they know that we try to genuinely represent them first, not the interest of any party. And that's where the party must learn, or else it's going to be in for a stern awakening in 2022 and beyond as we move forward.
What Republicans are doing what could be described as something right, which is working for them?
Well, what we do see is that there's you can either rely on the politics of fear or the politics of trust. And so the Republicans in Virginia utilized some fear tactics, whether it be in critical race theory or a variety of other pieces. And those are working. We tried Democrats to use the politics of fear as well. Most of the campaign was about how the Republicans were tied to Trump. We just cannot operate that way. People are not interested in it. And our strength is going to be in leveraging the politics of trust and showing people we are here to represent them, especially since we have been in power, so that they can trust us to continue to try to represent their interests. And we failed to do that during the campaign season and make that connection with rural voters, with Black and brown individuals, and certainly with progressives across the state.
So are there Democratic candidates, Democratic leadership in Virginia who are listening to voices like yours?
I think it is certainly a growing minority. We are, as people are looking for answers. I think when we were talking about 2014, 2015, there were very few of us. After the 2016 election, many more people stepped up and said, we've got to do something different. The problem is that in this case, history repeated itself somewhat. And in 2021 was a lot like 2016 for us here in Virginia, where we let an establishment-heavy, very self-righteous tone rule the day. That cannot work in moving forward. So I'm hoping that we will learn our lessons and grow from that. But there is a growing sentiment in Virginia that we've got to do something different for sure.
Why President Biden has become so unpopular despite winning Virginia and the rest of the country?
Well, I think that there are many pieces to that, and certainly my subjective opinion would probably have a little bit to do with, really to me, it kind of started with Afghanistan. I think that they did not do a great job in coming out of Afghanistan. And then it began to trickle from there, where people's frustrations in going back to school, trying to make sure that children and parents were safe. There's just frustration as people wanting to get back to normal. And then there are some here and there some mounting economic frustrations, and that's mainly from the disparity, because the economy has been doing relatively well, but there's been a disparity in who is lifted up along the way. I think all of that has come together during this campaign season.
But don't you think Biden, through his stimulus package, number one, number two, and all those things, some money has been flowing to poor people? I mean, poverty somewhat has gone down, statistically speaking, bringing more people able to handle themselves. So why that was not something which Democrats could take advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, so I believe that President Biden has done a pretty good job in many different ways, for sure. Trying to analyze the data, specifically here in Virginia, we certainly just did not talk about all of the good things that we've done and then how we can do more to build on that. That was not the basis of the campaign. And a message to candidates out there in 2022 and beyond, you have to articulate your vision of how you're going to improve people's lives. And what we did mainly was to talk about how the Republican candidates were tied to Trump. We were not focused on the successes we've had and what more we can be doing to help people. So we failed at a campaign level, not so much at the policy level.
Is that what, a Democratic strategist, James Carville, he blames Terry McAuliffe's governor election loss in Virginia on quote unquote stupid wokeness. I'm still trying to understand what wokeness is, but a Democrat is using right here the terminology which probably Republicans came up with. What is wokeness and what is he talking about?
Yeah, so I mean, classic example of a very establishment figure wanting to blame the progressive left for a loss. Now, regardless of where your political affiliation is, if you're more moderate or more progressive or more conservative, understand this. We nominated the most establishment, most moderate white male we could here in Virginia. We, in Virginia, passed legislation that was very reasonable along the way. A lot of the progressive legislation that we wanted did not pass. We have not passed progressive legislation at the federal level that is really pushing the envelope. So I believe that the moderates have had control every step of the way. The reality is we've lacked the ability to articulate clearly how we're going to improve people's lives. And there are a number of progressive policies that if we had the fortitude to explain it to people and the courage to stand up to big moneyed interests, very powerful, well-funded special interests, that we could make this connection and people will see that we're operating in their best interest. But many times these well-funded interests, they convolute the conversation.
Sam, I mean, you have tried to run for the Democratic primary as the deputy governor of Virginia, and a moderate defeated you there. Do you think this conflict between moderate Democrats and progressive Democrats is going to essentially drown the Democratic chances in the forthcoming election?
I think that this is a false narrative. I think that the Democratic Party, to be successful, must be a big tent party where people who are both moderate and liberal can find a home. What really gets in our way is these powerful special interests who come in and fund these candidates and put their finger on the scale. So what actually happened wasn't that a more moderate candidate was nominated, for example, in my race. I think that by all accounts, you can see that not only establishment, but very well-funded corporate interests came in and said, oh, we can control these policies better with this candidate. And so when we're, as a party, thinking about politics, we need to stop thinking as Democrats about the problems between moderates and liberals and really think about the problems between these corporate interests and the rest of us, because that is really what is drowning the party.
Well, thank you so much, Sam Rasool, for your time, delegate from Virginia and a major political leader. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you, ma'am, for your time.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid and Delegate Rasool. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube and Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.